475 miles due south of Miami, on the far side of Cuba, is a British West Indian island called Grand Cayman. One of 3 Cayman Islands, its sandy shores are bathed by the warm Caribbean Sea. With an average temperature of 75 degrees, coupled with just the right amount of rainfall, Cayman's climate is so ideal that if you were to stick a fence post into the ground, there's a good possibility it would turn into a tree. The Cayman Islands are rich in romantic history, with buccaneers and pirates such as Henry Morgan having headquartered here. As early as 1631, Pedro the Terrible built a castle, which today, after having been ravaged by time and fire, is still standing. It's rumored that treasure is buried at Grand Cayman, and indeed, riches have been found in her offshore waters. Discovered by Columbus in 1503, Cayman's people are descendants of slaves, fugitives from the Cuban-Spanish War, and deserters from Oliver Cromwell's army. Hugh Thompson was one of the actual Marines who raised the U.S. flag on Iwo Jima during the Second World War. Caymanians are renowned sailors, with many of the men going to sea for 10 years at a time. On a busy Saturday, Georgetown can be as congested as many large U.S. cities. International banking concerns find the Caribbean islands a good investment and erect many fine bank buildings here. As a matter of fact, Grand Cayman is currently facing a building boom, largely because of her banking interests and recent popularity with travelers. Caymanians are an industrious lot of people, and their attractive shops afford something for almost everyone. Georgetown's Modern Motion Picture Theater, one of the busiest places on a Saturday night, presents the very latest in Hollywood entertainment. If you're a sailor, have a passion for kick the ball near the surf, love dazzling sunsets and sugar sand beaches, you'll definitely enjoy a visit to Grand Cayman Island. But if you're a scuba diver, then Grand Cayman is a must for you to visit, for her waters hold some of the finest diving to be found in the entire Caribbean. One of the advantages of diving in the tropics is that most of the Caribbean islands have at least one established professional instructor and guide. He knows where all the best diving spots are, has diving equipment available for rent, and can teach the uninitiated to safely explore the coral reefs. Bob Soto has been in this business for the last 15 years. He started with one set of diving gear and the willingness to put in 65-hour weeks. His wife, Alita, is the unofficial tank filler, dive shop operator, and mother of 3 energetic boys. Cam Johnson, who is probably the finest mechanic on the island, has been with Bob for 11 years. Some days, 3 trips are run out to the nearby reefs with as many as 15 people on each trip. Special travel groups that are diving-oriented will come to Grand Cayman for 2 weeks and dive every day. And this is one of the rewarding aspects of this business, meeting all these different people. Everyone from students to brain surgeons dive with Soto, and he gets many repeats. Needless to say, the air compressor is running practically all the time. Many days, Bob's diving guides are in the water more than they're out, and when they're out, they're usually busy getting ready for the next dive. And the diving? Well, Bob thinks that it's some of the best in the world. Diving in the Caribbean is some of the finest to be found anywhere. With simply a mask, fins, and a snorkel tube, it's possible to explore marvelous undersea gardens and play tag with the beautiful French angelfish. Fascinating animals like the stingray can be found in just 5 or 6 feet of water. Petrified forests of elkhorn coral take on awesome appearances. Corals need sunlight and clean water in which to thrive, and if by chance the water was to become polluted, the corals would die off and the now fertile reefs would become a desert. All corals, including the staghorn variety, attain their delicate forms from microscopic animals called polyps. These polyps secrete lime to build their rigid homes and are thus the very foundation of a barrier reef. Yet as beautiful as a shallow coral reef can be, one of the most attractive aspects of Grand Cayman diving are its fabulous drop-offs. Beginning in just 60 feet of water half a mile from the island are sheer vertical walls that plunge down into hundreds of feet of water. Along these walls are magnificent growths of colorful sponges, sea whips, and black coral. The plastic variety of sponges we know in the bathtub give no hint at all of the marvelous diversity in colors and shapes of sponges that adorn a coral wall. The only facet of ledger wall diving that sets the adrenaline flowing faster than the bizarre beauty of Van Gogh sponges is the anticipation of discovering black coral. The romanticism that permeates black coral diving comes from its history and the high price placed in this gem-like coral growth that can be carved into jewelry. In the Indian Ocean, it is called akbar and is often used there to make scepters, which are carried by kings and princes. Some Orientals believe that black coral will ward off the evil spirits of disease. The coral gains its color from the absorption of iodine from the sea. It will vary from a dark brown color in its natural state to an ebony black color when it has been cured. In Hawaii, where black coral diving was once very popular commercially, the coral is all but dived out in depths to 300 feet. Off Grand Cayman, there are beautiful thick fields of it growing in comparatively shallow water in the subdued light and protection of the coral walls.
Why, yes, we do have some black coral jewelry. As a matter of fact, we have quite a nice selection. Over there on the shelf are some of our necklaces, cufflinks, and earrings. But I have some more interesting pieces here you might like to see. Oh, yes, sir. Our divers bring it up from over 200 feet deep, and it's very dangerous work. It's becoming very fashionable, and we do sell quite a lot of it.
Bob Soto discovered black coral off Grand Cayman almost 10 years ago. He's found it in water as shallow as 30 feet, but the biggest and prettiest coral is found from 150 feet down along the drop-offs. Other animals such as sponges, ascidians, and shellfish live in the coral trees, and with their host they feed on plankton. The growth rate of black coral is only about 1 foot a year, and Bob has discovered a few 12-foot specimens.
Our divers make about $18 for a tree of black coral. I think it's quite possible to develop into a big jewelry market. You see, there's tons of it growing, just for the picking, off all the islands here in the Caribbean.
Bob has had people come into the shop offering him $25 to get them a black coral tree, but he won't do it. He doesn't let his guides or any of his guests pick it either. There's no control over everyone who dives the islands, and Bob is concerned that, like many other natural resources that have been exterminated, it could become seriously depleted. You know, I've seen crimson sponges covered with a white fur-like substance hanging from the branches of black coral trees along the North Shore. It's like something out of a dream, almost unreal. And to me, that's what makes black coral valuable. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if sites like this would remain there for all time so our children will be able to see them someday? A popular spot for diving not far from Bob Soto's, lying in the clear water of Georgetown Harbor, is a shipwrecked Balboa, a grain carrier that sank during a storm back in 1935. The shallow wreck is a favorite for diving veterans and beginners alike. John McKinney, age 13, his sister Kim, age 12, and their lovely mother, ageless, spent almost 2 weeks diving every day in the Balboa, which lies no deeper than 35 feet. John and Kim started scuba diving when they were 7 and 8 in the warm waters of the Bahamas, where they lived with their parents. But the Balboa is their first real shipwreck adventure. Scattered over a couple of acres on a white sandy bottom, the wreck provides home and protection for many of the sea's unusual creatures. Hundreds of scuba divers visit the wreck annually. Neither spearfishing nor collecting of any kind are allowed on the Balboa, and many of the visiting divers pleasantly while away their time exploring or feeding and photographing the fish. Established on the wreck, even in the brief span of time since her sinking, are minute varieties of living corals, which in turn provide housing for other tiny boring animals. These tiny Christmas tree-like serpulids are actually the gill structure of a simple sea worm. The twin spirally arranged organs are utilized as a combination of breathing gills and feeder tentacles which trap plankton. At the slightest sign of a pressure wave, the worm instantly jerks his gill plumes into the tube, and if you're quiet and patient, they will reappear right before your eyes. Off to one side is the boiler section of the Balboa. Its flat top is ideal as a fish feeding station. Divers may chop up spiny sea urchins or use conch, a shellfish, to feed the wreck's always hungry inhabitants. Fish that are otherwise difficult to approach will practically eat right out of your hand, and at times is just like sitting in a giant aquarium. The four-eyed butterfly fish sports a false eye near its tail. Confused predators calculate the fish's movement by this eye and consequently miss their prey. The brilliant but shy yellow and black rock beauty is a member of the angelfish family, and on the open reefs is a difficult fish to get close to. Now watch this banded butterfly fish dart in here to claim her share of the conch, but she's a rather finicky eater. Look close and you'll see her spit it out. Right there. And I'm afraid there's just more of the same over here. Meanwhile, a wary red hind is keeping an eye peeled in the entire proceedings, while Kim spots the lovely Queen Angel, one of the Caribbean's most beautiful fish. And on this blue tang, do you see the tiny speck of yellow at the base of her tail? It's a razor-sharp spine that, when in danger, she flicks out to deal a devastating blow to her enemies. Spanish-speaking people also call her Barbero, since the barber was known in early days to practice bloodletting. Inside those sections of the wreck which provide better protection can be found still more colorful fish and other equally fascinating creatures. The quarrelsome Sergeant Major is busy routing a rival out of hearth and home. The black bar soldier fish is elusive and shy and seldom ventures out into open water. Mr. Barber Shrimp, otherwise known as a banded coral shrimp, is somewhat of a busybody, usually seen nosing into other fish's business. He does, however, do them a service. When not disturbed by a diver's presence, this little red and white spindly crustacean cleans the parasites off other fish, getting a meal at the same time. These are but a few of the beautiful and interesting things that can be found on a shipwreck like the Balboa. But you know, you really haven't made a dive on her until you visit her at night. You've been watching my family before my camera when filming is best between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Close to midnight now, with artificial lamps lighting our way, Bob Soto is personally conducting our tour. Some creatures are as active in the dark hours as during the daytime, while others are primarily nocturnal. The boxfish, who actually wears a skeleton on the outside of his body and who normally sleeps at night, is quite disturbed and partially mesmerized by the bright lights. An awkward little fish, at night he can easily be caught by hand. You know, the inquisitive nature of a 13-year-old boy is quite remarkable. Every day I'm asked a dozen different questions on every conceivable subject, and I can just hear his busy little mind working now. Why does he feel so funny? How come his tail is shaped that way? I wonder what will happen if I let him go. Whoops. I don't know where he went, Dad. Sorry about that. He just got away. Oh, watch out. You don't want to step on this fellow. A large green moray eel close to 5 feet long could inflict a nasty bite. But generally, these creatures too are timid and just like to be left alone. During the day, spiny sea urchins can be found in coral crevices and inside the wreck away from the direct sunlight. They come out in force at night and are more of a nuisance than a moray eel. And there are some fish who just don't care at all whom they pick for a bedfellow. Others, like the black bar soldierfish, which we saw earlier, become as active at night as during the day when disturbed by the camera light. And do you remember the blue tang with a protective yellow spine at her tail? This is what she looks like in the daytime. At night, she puts on her striped pajamas to retire. Beneath a nearby coral head, we found a sleeping nurse shark. Keeping him company was a remora. Now, although the remora has a suction pad on its head with which it can attach itself to a shark, it is very seldom observed actually doing this. Instead, he busily scurries about the shark, keeping him clean of parasites, and in turn, the benefactor shark provides room and board. To give you an idea of the size of this shark, look at the tiny sergeant major near its tail. And needless to say, one should never disturb a sleeping shark, even a docile nurse shark, because they do have teeth. Inside the wreck, a recently molted lobster is surprised by our bright lights and tiptoes gingerly into the sanctuary of her boudoir. Meanwhile, her Casanova is outside making a clean getaway. Johnny closes in on what he had anticipated to be his dinner. Squid, very seldom seen during the daytime, were constantly attracted to our lights at night. As we close in on one, another joins him, and together they make a quick exit right, leaving behind a couple of mock squids in the form of ink clouds. Someone once said that parrotfish were largely responsible for producing many of the world's tropical sand beaches. It is estimated that on a given reef area, parrotfish using their chisel-like beaks to bite off chunks of coral and their rasp-like teeth to grind the coral into fine organic matter pass 1 ton per acre per year of this material through their intestinal tracts, depositing it as sand. This mature, or super male parrotfish as he is called, is suspected of being a sexually reversed female. And unlike most of the female parrotfish and the intermediate phase males, super male picks but one female with which to spawn, passing up the group sessions which are so popular with the other members of his family. Because of his sharp beak, you must be careful, of course, not to stick a finger into his mouth. But with a little patience and the right technique as indicated by Bob Soto, super male can be putty in your hands. One fish that evokes more interest than any other is the trumpet fish, so named because of his long and slender shape. When disturbed, the spiny pufferfish will ingest water, making a rather formidable mouthful for any who would be foolish enough to attempt a bite. The deflated small ones can easily be caught by hand. They too have vice-like jaws that could break a finger, but they're such shy creatures, chances of them swimming over just to give you a nip are extremely slim. Do you recall the words about the octopus that Victor Hugo wrote in Toilers of the Sea? "The tiger can only devour you," he said. "The devilfish, horrible, sucks your lifeblood away. Powerless, you feel yourself gradually emptied into this horrible pouch, which is the monster itself." Obviously, our frightened little octopus trying to escape out the back door never read Victor Hugo. A timid creature, capable of changing color, he spends his daylight hours hiding in the Balboa. At night, he skulks about the wreck foraging for food. Now, although an octopus does have a beak, he generally only uses it when eating. Even his giant Puget Sound brothers, sometimes reaching 16 feet across at the tentacles, would prefer staying in their lair to coming face to face with a diver. His only concern at the moment is to escape inquisitive John. Finally, he senses that he can get away. He settles to the sand and cautiously begins to search for the wreck, for he knows once inside he will be safe. Slowly he starts off, but in the wrong direction. Then, sensing his mistake, he creeps over toward his left. To a mound, rears up to determine his direction, spots the wreck, settles down, and continues on. And as it is time for our friend to leave, our time too is coming to an end. Our air supply is almost gone, and as we begin our ascent, our little octopus, having changed color, makes it to the wreck. Tired and played out, he slips beneath the boilerplate into the darkness and safety of his home. Grand Cayman, its pure, cool depths. The Balboa, its virgin beaches, all seem to have been created especially for water-loving people. There's hardly a better place to give vent to the Columbus in us. And if the investors who come to develop her use foresight in their planning, like the jewel that she is now, her water resources can remain forever an unspoiled Eden.